Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheryl Mangan, Manager of Knowledge Translation at Autism CRC, and the privilege of being your host today for the webinar, which is the second in our Autism Month webinar series for 2021. We're holding 6 webinars this Autism Month to improve understanding about autism and to share some of Autism CRC's latest research and outcomes across our 3 programs, the early years, school years, and adulthood. We've had our first webinar on Thursday last week, which included the launch of the latest reports from the Australian Autism Research Council, or the ARC, a community-led group which is auspiced by the Autism CRC. Today's webinar focuses on writing and transitions for children and young people on the spectrum. Tomorrow we have 2 webinars, one on health assessment and diagnosis, including the rollout and implementation of the national guideline, and one to discuss the landmark report which we released late last year, which summarised the best available evidence for interventions for children on the spectrum. On Thursday, we're talking about autism in the workplace, and on Friday, we have a panel discussion featuring 3 autistic scholars. It's not too late to register if you're interested in attending any of our other webinars. So before we get started today, I'd like to acknowledge that I am joining you from the traditional lands of the Yuggera people and the Turrbal peoples. I recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters and culture, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. For today's webinar, I'd like to let you know that you will have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing your questions into the Q&A panel of the Zoom control panel, which you can click on at the bottom of your screen. It has 2 speech bubbles on it as an icon. If you would like to send a question, please include the name of the presenter for whom the question is for. Please submit questions for the speakers via the Q&A panel rather than the chat panel to make sure that we see them. You can send your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect them and address as many as we can at the end of the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. On today's topic, in Program 2, the school years, we're focused on building capacity and developing appropriate educational environments and programs for social, behavioural and academic success. Working with students, parents, school systems, teachers and health professionals, we're developing programs and resources to support students to succeed at school and beyond. Today, we've brought together Professor Peta Wyeth and Associate Professor Marina Ciccarelli, 2 leading specialists to present some of our evidence-based tools that can help children in the areas of persuasive writing and transitioning from school to work or further study. Our first presenter today will be Professor Peta Wyeth. Peta is an Autism CRC project leader and head of school for computer science at Queensland University of Technology. Peta is at the forefront of research into emerging technologies for games and other interactive experiences. She has wide-ranging experience in the application of human-computer interaction and interaction design techniques for the development of technology for education and entertainment. Her research outputs are tangible products that have been used in a range of educational settings. Today, Peta is here to talk to us about StepWrite, a co-designed app to help children with their persuasive writing. Without further delay, I'd like to welcome Peta.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll just share my screen with you. Okay, I trust you can all hear that. I will see that. Yes, as Cheryl mentioned, today I'm presenting StepWrite, which was a project designed to harness the writing potential of children on the autism spectrum. This is a really collaborative project, and I'm presenting this work on behalf of my colleagues Anne Oselska, Jill Ashburner and Suzanne Carrington. And what I love about this project was our ability through the CRC to bring together this truly multidisciplinary team We have Jill, who's a specialist in speech therapy and has worked at Autism Queensland for many years now as their research director. Suzanne Carrington, who's an expert in education and worked as the Associate Dean for Research in our Faculty of Education. And Anne Ozdowska, who was our, the pivotal person for this project, who brought it all together. She was our PhD student, so passionate about the project. So I'm really honoured to present this work on behalf of the team. So before I get started, I too would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and the Yagara as the First Nation owners of the lands where QUT now stands. I pay my respects to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits, and recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning. I acknowledge the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play within the QUT community. So before I get into the details of Step Right, I just want to go through the history. This has been a project that started in 2014. We've got to the point in 2021 where we're about to release an app on the App Store, and that's very exciting for us. So there's been a number of iterations of this particular project, right from its beginning back in 2014, where we proposed a project called Project Power Tree, which was really focused on overcoming difficulties with written expression for children on the autism spectrum. This was an initial project, one of the starting projects for the CRC Autism, and this is when the group was brought together. We were fortunate enough, it was successful, and we really wanted to grow what we could do with the technology that we built. So we were interested in creating, supporting technology to help children with written expression. And so in 2017, we were provided with additional funding from the CRC Autism through a utilisation project proposal. And at that point, we changed the name of the tool to Power Writer. We used our lessons learnt from the initial project to refine the development, and I'm going to talk about that today, until we've got to 2021, where we changed the name yet again to Step Right, which we think is a great name. We didn't have any issues with trademark with that name, and what we've included is some final updates, refinement and a pending release, which is very exciting. So what were we interested in? We know, and studies have shown, that academic tasks, and particularly writing-based tasks, are among the most challenging for children on the autism spectrum. And we also understand that any issues around written expression can negatively impact on children's ability to perform academically at school. And so this is a real challenge. It's a challenge for children on the spectrum, but it's also a challenge for many children who go to school. So this is something that we really wanted to look into as part of the project. We also have seen evidence that we know that children on the spectrum struggle with fine motor and perceptual skills associated with handwriting. And we've seen research that shows that assistive technologies such as keyboards can really support children who challenge with handwriting and and may have some physical difficulties with handwriting activities. So what we proposed then was to examine and design, develop, implement technology that would support the activity of written expression. So this is, I guess, where the whole idea for Step Right came from. So when we were thinking about this project, and Anne did a lot of thinking about this project, and we developed a framework to really understand what we were trying to achieve with the software and with the assistive technology. And we needed to consider the student. So what needs were we trying to support? What challenges were facing children, particularly in mainstream classrooms? I should say that when we were thinking about this technology and we were thinking about the support we would offer, we were very much interested in how we could roll technology out within classroom contexts. So we were looking at what needs we needed to support. When we were thinking about environment, we were thinking about that environment. So how we might move from school to home, how the software might take into consideration the social context, and that idea of working within a classroom environment. What are the barriers that the teachers might face if they were trying to roll out writing experiences and writing activities? And we were thinking about the task itself. And when it came to that task, what we really wanted to acknowledge is this idea of universal design for learning. And what this concept is that we create technology that's ready for every child. Every child within a classroom might find this technology useful in some ways. And this sort of strategy acknowledges that children are naturally diverse learners. And what we wanted to the technology and the app to do was to be appropriate for children with different skills, interests, motivations. And so it would be able to, you know, if we come back to that environment circle that you can see on the screen, it would be something that every child in a classroom could pick up and use and find effective and engaging and interesting. And when we look at sort of the intersection between these three areas, or the way we framed it is that when we're thinking about the student and the task, if we create something that supports your needs and it has this universal design approach, then that will give students a sense of self-efficacy. So this idea that they are in control, they can pick it up, they can use it by themselves. You know, there was this idea that sometimes assistive technologies, when they're rolled out in classrooms, make students feel different or unusual or set apart from everyone else. And we really wanted to kind of avoid that sense that you're using this technology and it's because, you know, we've singled you out and you need this support. So we wanted to create something where everyone would feel, I guess, confident and competent and really harnessing their motivations to use the software to feel successful. When we're thinking about the environment and the task, what we were then also trying to do was get this sense of scaffolding. So how can we scaffold children to step through the tasks, to do it in a sort of chunked way so that they could feel, once again, confident in what they're doing, but in a guided way. So it's not like a blank sheet of paper that you might get when you're asked to do a particular writing task. And I guess the final piece of the puzzle for us was thinking about the student and the environment and thinking about this idea of how do we support children to you know, we were, as Cheryl mentioned, we were particularly interested in persuasive writing. Persuasive writing is something we know all children are required to do when they're doing their NAT plan testing, as an example, in schools. And so what we were trying to do is think about what strategies could we roll out in a classroom context that would support students. And we worked within a self-regulation strategy, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. So self-regulation strategy has been shown to support the conceptual aspects of writing. It's a technique that encourages students to plan, to organise, to sequence their ideas, to write and to review. So what we found is that this was a really effective strategy for us to consider in the design of some technology to support children. We chose a particular strategy called Power Tree, and that's why our first version of the software was called Project Power Tree. This is a simple mnemonic that children can use, or anyone can use, to think about how they might structure a piece of persuasive writing. So POW stands for pick my idea, organise my notes, write and say more. And then the tree aspect is, you know, getting into the details of actually writing a piece of persuasive text where you have, you know, paragraphs structured with a topic sentence, some reasons for why you take a particular point in view, you explain those reasons, and then you end and examine and you think about that. So it encourages some reflection as well. This particular mnemonic is built on the work of Harris et al, and I've included the reference there if you're interested. So what we decided to do was embed this particular strategy within the software so students could, in a systematic way, work through this strategy to help them construct text. So just when you, and I guess what I wanted to show with this particular slide is, you know, this has been a process where we've undertaken development. So we took this idea, we undertook the initial prototype development. We then, we wanted to see how effective it was, and Cheryl talked about this idea of evidence-based outcomes, and we really wanted to understand the strengths of the software that we had developed. We did that looking at particular children, but we also examined the class-wide use within mainstream schools. So we took it out, we worked with classroom classes, and we looked at all students using the app. We did some updates based on that, and that's when that utilisation project came into play. And we did a further study examining in-class use within Autism Queensland schools. So when it came to app development, it was very much an iterative process and a co-design process. And when I talk about co-design, I mean that it involved a lot of different people. And this was one of the things that Anne worked very hard on as a part of the PhD process. So initially we did some low fidelity prototyping. So this was Anne working with a graphic designer to flesh out ideas. And these ideas were based on an examination of existing educational technology aged for children between 9 and 12. And we did focus on that sort of age group between grade 4 and grade 7, when we think it's very important as you're developing skills and abilities around written expression, and particularly persuasive writing. So we did focus in that age group. Based on that prototyping, there were then co-design activities. So this was with, I think it was 4 groups of children came together, and that was including children on the autism spectrum. So we got input from a broad range of children. We were then involved in the app development and prototype refinement, and that was with teachers. That was with an adult on the autism spectrum and 2 children, and one of those children was on the autism spectrum. So it's been through quite a rigorous process. I'll show you some of the initial screenshots, and you can see here how the mnemonic comes out through the scaffolding. So we've got the POW as you start to develop the ideas, and the tree coming together as children are prompted as they work through to develop their ideas. What do we find? And I realise that I sort of need to wrap it up. It's really hard to talk about 7 years of research in 15 minutes. Thanks, Cheryl. So what we found out, and we have a paper publication about the findings, and I've got a reference to that later, is that we found that teachers and students reported that they felt the app improved overall quality of writing outcomes, and it actually supported students to write more. And when we looked at, we interviewed students, we asked them questions, and they reported that they were feeling more positive. And we thought that was a really important outcome. They felt that it was helping them improve their planning, their goal setting, and their ability to evaluate their writing. Teachers noticed that the students' writing improved after class, and they used the app for 4 weeks, and afterwards they felt that their in-class writing had improved and there was more willingness to engage in writing. We did see some room for improvement. We got feedback from children to say that they wanted more game-like features. We know kids play games. They wanted it to look a bit more like a game, to feel a bit more like a game. And we needed to better capture the outcomes from writing. We didn't have a very good way to catch that for teachers to look at the writing outcomes and to say those sort of outcomes. We also noticed that we needed more flexibility and to provide this notion of personal preference. You know, this is what interests and that a student might bring to the process. So there's free writing you can do now. You can see with the current screenshots that we've got badges and awards and achievements associated with using the app. So we're very excited about those updates. We have done a trial at Autism Queensland schools. As I've said, it was undertaken over 1 school term, 4 classes across 2 schools. And we did in-class observations and teacher interviews. And we're analysing that data at the moment. And our preliminary analysis indicates positive outcomes from this trial as well. So that's the Step Right project in 15 minutes. I would love to answer any questions that you have. And I've put the reference to the paper that we've written that describes in more detail the outcomes of that first study. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Peter. You did a very good job of squeezing 7 years of research and an incredible amount of work into 15 minutes, so well done. On that note, of course, the approach that Peter and Anne particularly took with the Universal Design for Learning approach is very consistent with the Autism CRC's approach to our work in the education space, where of course we're increasingly finding that which benefits the students on the spectrum actually benefits the whole class, and Anne's research particularly certainly affirmed that. So thank you, Peter. So just a reminder to all of our listeners that if you have any questions for any of our presenters, you can type them into the Q&A panel of the Zoom control, and we'll go through as many as we can fit into the end of our Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So our next speaker is Associate Professor Marina Ciccarelli. Marina is Autism CRC Project Leader and Associate Professor in the School of Occupational Therapy and Social Work at Curtin University. Marina returned to academia at Curtin in 2000 after 10 years of clinical work in the United States, where she worked in the fields of ergonomics, occupational safety and health, injury management, adult physical rehab and pediatrics. She's presently the discipline lead for occupational therapy at Curtin University. Marina is very passionate about supporting people on the autism spectrum to fully participate in the community and to reach their potential, as we all are at the Autism CRC. To this end, Marina was Chief Investigator in the Better Outcomes and Successful Transitions for Autism Foundational Research, and is our wonderful co-leader of myWAY Employability, an online career planner to empower young people on the spectrum to plan and prepare for post-school education, training and work. Marina's here today to talk to us about myWAY Employability and Inclusion Ed, and show us particularly how teachers can use these resources to support students in their transition planning. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Marina. Take it away.
Cheryl, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm just going to share my screen with you all now so we can begin this presentation. Okay, I'm coming to you from Perth, Western Australia, and so I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the transition from school to post-school options, whether it be to further study, training, or ultimately employment for young autistic individuals. So just some figures here. 1 in 59 people in Australia are on the autism spectrum, but 1 in 3 young autistic people are either underemployed or unemployed. And less than half of them are engaging in post-school education or training. Sadly, they're 6 to 10 times more likely to attempt suicide or self-harm. And if we look at this from a whole of community perspective and a national employment perspective, that equates to a loss of economic productivity of around $412,000 per person who is not being gainfully employed in people who are on the autism spectrum. So we wanted to do something about this, and so we developed a solution that was based on 5 years worth of research in the development of an online resource. Some of you might be familiar with it. It was the Better Outcomes and Successful Transitions for Autism, or the Boost Day, which was the PhD project of one of my colleagues, Dr. Megan Hatfield, and I was privileged enough to be able to supervise Meg in her research. And as part of her doctoral studies, she identified 5 employability principles, which really are the ones that are underpinning the development of myWAY employability. And I want to share those with you. And in no particular order, start transition planning early, ideally year 9, but if not, as soon as possible after that. Keeping the young person at the centre of all transition planning and really listening to what it is that they want to do. Encouraging them to dream big, to set their sights really, really high, and not to limit themselves, because sometimes families and supporters want to ensure that young people don't fail, but that can also limit their growth. So really encouraging them to dream big. Focusing on the big picture of what work provides, and that's beyond a paycheck. It's about those social networks and having that valued place in society and understanding their role in the world. And having a champion on the team, and this is so, so important, somebody who will be an advocate for these young people. So our team in the development of myWAY employability, Cheryl, of course, from the Autism CRC has been my co-lead on this, and Brendan James, our digital product manager, but also Adi Wilmot was our research assistant in the development of a lot of the resources. And so we worked very, very closely as a team. And as Peta mentioned, we did a lot of co-production. So Cheryl and I were lucky enough to receive some funding through the Telstra Foundation through their Tech for Good Challenge. And as part of the market validation process and development of myWAY employability, we engaged with 46 autistic young people and about 147 of their parents and supporters. And what we heard from them with regards to what they wanted as a solution is they wanted a resource to assist them in that transition planning that used clear and literal language, that used uncluttered visual designs, was non-patronising in both the content and the language being used, recognised the unique capabilities of people on the autism spectrum, that the content was authentic and relevant to autistic individuals, and that the information being presented really had an autistic perspective. Once we had taken on board all of that feedback and we started to develop myWAY employability, we have continued to co-design through iterative testing and getting feedback from more than 90 young people on the autism spectrum. And these photos are some of the our Autism Youth Advisory group have provided us with really tangible feedback and design ideas. And so we created a website that is is uncluttered. It's very easy to navigate through, and really can be individualized for each user. It encourages them to explore their interests and their strengths, to create that big sky dream, and to start creating some goals, because without goals there can't be action towards achieving those. But also, really importantly, is to build a team to help them to work towards those goals. And the program also assists them in being able to schedule a regular meetings with their team to ensure that they're making progress through those goals. So I've taken some screenshots because we can't go live to the website, but basically a young person, or they actually don't have to be young, any individual can register a profile, and by registering a profile on myWAY Employability, they can start to individualize the content and their progress towards their goals. It encourages them to look at career exploration, identifying their strengths, their sensory preferences around their kind of work environment, looking at post-school employment opportunities or preferences, and considering what life skills they still might need to work on to assist them with that transition to employment. So unlike many other vocational career interest tests, it's not a binary kind of question, do you like banking or do you like agriculture? Instead, young people are asked about the things that they might like or dislike, and they can place those preferences anywhere along that sliding scale. So they can be quite precise about how much they like or dislike something. And each of these generic activities that are quite familiar to all individuals have been linked to John Holland's vocational personalities. So the program is able to provide some recommendations for suitable career pathways to start exploring, but it asks the information in very relevant and accessible language that even a 13, 14-year-old can relate to. Again, it asks them to identify what their strengths might be, because it's not just about harnessing interests, but also the strengths that the young person can bring to the workplace and to a job. And so they can put in whatever they feel that their particular strengths might be. They are also asked about particular life skills, and so, of course, being able to be independent in community mobility is really important. So perhaps working on driving or coaching public transportation might be one of those life skills that they want to work on to develop their employability. And again, as I said, asking them about some of their sensory preferences for the workplace. Do you want to work on your own or as part of a team, indoors, outdoors, in a quiet environment? Do you want to have a very kind of consistent routine every day, or don't you mind? And so once they also put those preferences in, it starts to further refine the kinds of jobs that might be suitable for them. They're then given a profile about their top career areas, and we felt it was really important that it wasn't just, oh, well, you're very good at this one particular area, because we're all good at different things in different ways. And we believe that it's important for people starting to consider what their future pathways might be, to kind of keep options open and not narrow them down. But they can certainly look to see the things that maybe, maybe I fill this out, and maybe that practical thing, those practical skills might not be my forte. And so I might look for career options that really take advantage of my other interests and strengths. The program prompts them to create some goals and some actions towards those goals. It asks them to set some dates and to assign to a team member. And this is where bringing that team that we talked about can be so important. And the young person is encouraged to identify their own team members. It might be a parent, a teacher, a mentor, a family member or a friend, but people that they they trust and that can help them progress towards meeting these employability goals and working towards identifying what they're interested in and taking those steps to finding out more about the job, how they might get into it, what kind of training is required, perhaps organising a work experience, starting to write a resume, whatever stage the person might be up to. And there's an opportunity then to review that progress, and it's so important that people see that they're progressing towards their goals. As I said, the involvement of the team is so important here to discuss the progress and to view things not as failures. So if the young person wasn't able to achieve something within a time frame, it might actually be because the goal is too big, and perhaps breaking it down into smaller goals. Or maybe it's not the right time for that goal, or maybe the person needs some further assistance in helping them progress through that goal. But it's about promoting that growth mindset. There's a range of resources on myWAY Employability to help autistic individuals and their supporters in understanding different facets of preparing for employment, starting from doing a workplace experience, perhaps while you're at school, all the way to looking for perhaps courses at TAFE or university, being able to apply for jobs, managing workplace communication and relationships, and then also looking at promotions and moving further. So there's something for everybody along that employment, that journey. And so the articles have been co-produced with a wonderful young journalism student, Alex, who's on the spectrum, and she's again been able to assist us to bring that voice through. There's an article there on how to be a great team member. And speaking of being a great team member, we believe that teachers are really well positioned to be a great advocate for young people in that transition. And so we developed a series of resources for educator called myWAY Employability Educator Resources. They've been co-designed with my colleague, Dr. Keely Harper-Hill from Queensland University of Technology. And again, these have been co-designed with teachers. And we're doing a trial in terms 2 and 3 of this year with an evaluation component to that, again, to see how we can refine it, make it better. Those employability resources for teachers are on the Inclusion Ed website and are freely available to all teachers. And it's really around that transition planning and how to bring that into the classroom and take it out of the classroom. They've been aligned with the Year 9 and 10 work studies curricula in the Australian curriculum framework, as well as the Year 11 and 12 vet studies, Foundation Skills Certificate 1. And so we've mapped these activities that include lesson plans, classroom practices, homework activities. And like Peter said, they could be done as a whole of classroom activity for the benefit of all children if it's a mainstream classroom, not just for kids who are on the spectrum. And teachers can pick and choose whatever they would like to throughout a semester. There's no set structure. But what we have done is we've provided a range of practices and classroom activities that are linked back to the myWAY Employability website. And we also understand that
Marina, I think we had some technical
We did.
Sorry.
Don't, no, it was at my end, and my apologies. Don't you just love Zoom meetings and the unpredictability of Zoom? So I just wanted to finish off, Cheryl, just to let people know that those resources are all available on Inclusion Ed. I'm not sure how far you got through my presentation, but they're available on Inclusion Ed. And we want to ask teachers who might be in Queensland, if you are interested in finding out more about the myWAY Employability Educator resources and have a try of them and give us some feedback, please do so, and we'll make my contact details available in. Do you want me to pull them up, Cheryl, on my PowerPoint, or?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yep. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and again, my apologies, everyone. I'm going to just, there they are. Sorry, so where I was up to was just letting you know about the differentiation of our resources for students and the various resources that are there. But we're inviting Queensland educators, if you'd like to try out some of those educator resources and give us some feedback. It's a quick 15-minute pre-post survey. And if you'd like to share some of your feedback through a short online interview with us, about 20 minutes, you can contact either myself or my colleague, Keely Harper-Hill at Queensland University of Technology, and our email addresses are there. But so we'd love to hear everything we've done, as with Peta, as part of that co-design process. And so we really want to ensure that we are producing materials that are relevant for people. It's what they want, and it's presented in a way that we want. So we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Marina. We would love to hear from you. And if you are actually not based in Queensland, but you still want to have a look at the resources, you can still access them on inclusioned.edu.au. And there's, as with all of our resources on Inclusion Ed, you can always provide feedback anyway. So they'll be trialled in Queensland, but we're also really, really wanting feedback from anyone who's using them. So I will start some questions and answers, and I'm going to kick off with a question for Peta first of all, and then I'm going to flick the same question to Marina. And that is, how important was the co-design process in the development of StepRight first of all, and then Marina in myWAY Employability and Educator. Peta.
It was pivotal to what we were trying to achieve. The whole way through, we wanted something that a child could pick up, use by themselves, feel you know, that they were motivated, they were engaged, that they could do it without any help. And it was, you know, we thought we had some sort of scaffolding around what sorts of topics. And so we thought very carefully, and it was brilliant to have 9-year-olds telling us the things that interested them, you know, so that was really nice to kind of give some prompts around what kinds of writing tasks we could put in there as examples. So it was invaluable. And I think as we moved to creating something that included more game elements, we realised that actually this is the world that children live in, that they're used to some of these structures around badges and rewards, and and just seeing progress as they move through a particular activity. And so it was very important. And the other part of the co-design was really acknowledging teachers. So we wanted to make sure that it was something that teachers would feel comfortable using in schools, that they could once again pick up and use. We know there are some challenges in schools around different technologies, and we did come across that, you know, different ways of rolling out you know, these kinds of apps in school contexts. And so we had to work with that for our studies, but we hope that, you know, moving forward, that some of those issues get resolved. And we loved that you could take it from home to school, and by making it available on a tablet. And initially it started its life as web, and we kind of went backwards and forwards around that, but we're very happy with the solution we got, and we think it's only because we talked to so many people about what they wanted, how they used things, what they needed, what they were interested in, and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. And Marina, the same question for you. How important was the co-design process in myWAY Employability and Educator?
It was absolutely fundamental because I am not on the autism spectrum. I don't have a child on the autism spectrum. And whilst I've had the privilege of speaking to many, many families and amazing young people on the spectrum over many years, it was really important for this to be a solution that that met their needs. We asked them what their needs were, we listened to what those needs were, and then we initiated a design process that included them to ensure that the solution was going to be indeed something that was going to be useful to them. I think the other thing to consider, and Peter just mentioned it was important to kind of consider teachers, not just the children, is that we have a range of users for myWAY Employability and the educator resources. So myWAY Employability was designed for kids as young as about 14, all the way through to adulthood, 30 plus, or you know, people are going to be on that employment journey until the time when they're no longer either working for a paycheck, but may still be engaged in volunteer work or other work. So it was really, really important to consider a range of users, but also their supporters, so the teachers and the families and allied health professionals, employment support specialists. What is it that they might be able to use when supporting these young people in starting off this journey? And we also recognise that making something, having that universal design elements to it, means that whilst we are able to deliver something that might be ideal for young people on the spectrum, all people can benefit from it because of those design elements. So absolutely, the co-design process is fundamental throughout.
Thank you. So I'm going to, this is probably the hottest question that's come through throughout the webinar. When is Step Right expected to be released? And I can answer that question because I'll have the joy of actually pushing the publish button to the App Store. And the answer is any day now. We obviously have contact details of everyone who's registered for this webinar. And so when we actually do release the app onto the App Store, we'll also be contacting you via that registration email that you've provided to let you know that it is available. The next question is, how do people access myWAY Employability? And Marina, that's for you.
Thank you, Cheryl. From our website, so www.mywayemployability, all one word, .com.au, and that's freely available all around Australia and in fact internationally. And the inclusion, so the teacher resources are available on www.inclusioned, all one word, .edu.au, and again freely available to teachers in Australia around the world.
Thank you. And we've just posted those in the chat panel so that you've got the links, and again we will also publish those when we contact you with follow-up communications from this webinar. Another question for you, Peter, is has the app been used with children on the autism spectrum with co-occurring conditions such as intellectual disability?
I nearly forgot to unmute myself.
We've got you.
So for the original study in mainstream schools, we didn't include students with comorbidity such as severe physical or cognitive impairments. We talked a lot about it. It was a decision at the time where we wanted to ensure that we could get results and children who could effectively communicate with us about how they were going with the app. So I guess the answer is no, not really. Though, you know, and I note that Jill is online, and so when we took the app out to schools at Autism Queensland, we did that deliberately to really broaden the group of students who had access to the app and to see more, I guess, you know, how different populations would, you know, how useful and usable they would find that. I don't know, Jill, if you want to comment further on that. I've probably put her on the spot slightly. I noticed she's unmuted, so that's a good first step.
Yeah, I think probably in the first study, I think we noted that one of the students with the most challenges with difficulty reading and writing actually made the greatest progress.
Yeah.
Also at the Autism Queensland school, I think there were quite a few with various challenges like language issues and cognitive challenges. But I think Anne was surprised about how well those students did and how much progress they made. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, on that point, it was interesting when we did do look at the study and the stats, we found actually, you know, children that were more proficient at writing to start with saw less gains, right? So we're actually really excited by that. As Jill mentioned, that one of the children in our original study who really struggled, even, you know, some of our issues were around whether you could type or not. And so this is when we were thinking about our exclusion criteria, I guess, for the study. And I think in the thesis, this particular student was using hunt and peck, you know, like, so sometimes it wasn't necessarily about the conceptual, it was around the physical. But we found significant improvements across sort of both number of words, and we got NAPLAN markers to mark, and so we found improvements in the quality of the writing.
Thank you. And thank you, Jill, for joining us and for jumping on that question as well. It's wonderful to have you. So the next question is a question for Marina, and I'm trying to just balance this a little bit. So I'm really sorry if we're not going to get to everybody today. So given employers' increased emphasis on soft skills, can you discuss how the program supports students to identify their strengths in these areas? Marina.
Yeah, actually, that's a really, really good question. So part of the identifying strengths, young people identifying strengths, but also their goals might be around the soft skills and particularly around some of the communication and their ability to manage anxiety in the workplace, being able to work as part of a team. And so some of those things can be identified as goals within the goal setting function. And there might be specific strategies that the young person then might undertake, and it might be around social skills development or opportunity for role plays, opportunity to engage with work experience in a safe environment first to start to develop some of those. And so there are some articles as well, resource articles, which give some strategies and some links to resources and how to address those. One of the things that we're wanting to move more in as we continue to develop out myWAY Employability is also then providing some information to employers as to how to work with young people to support them in the development of some of those soft skills, and understanding that people when they start on day one may not come and hit the ground necessarily running, but what are some of the ways in which the workplace can also develop some of those soft skills in young people. So, and whether that be through a work experience opportunity or some kind of internship. So it's a really, really important aspect. And so some of the resource articles on myWAY will allow young people to do that. And some of the educator resources also give kids an opportunity to do some role plays with one another in the classroom. And I just wanted to say, Cheryl, that for teachers who might be also delivering their curriculum online, the myWAY employability educator resources can all be delivered in an online format as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marina. So we've only got a few more minutes, but there is a really important question that's come through, and it's one for the CRC. So are there transition planning resources that cover a broad range of life goals, particularly for young people with communication challenges? And the answer to that question is absolutely there is. There's the Adolescent and Adult Goal Setting Tool, the AAGST, which was developed by Autism Queensland and Autism CRC. And the project leader is Jill Ashburner, who thankfully has also joined us. So the AAGST assists adults and adolescents to prioritise and develop their goals in areas including social relationships, self-care, home living, study, training, employment, health and fitness, community access, participation, communication, managing finances and emotional well-being. It has 74 picture cards that the user then sorts into piles, including, yes, I want to work on this. No, I don't want to work on this right now, and I'm not so sure about this. They prioritise the goals within the ones they want to work on, and then personalise the goals so that they're meaningful in the context of their life. As it's a picture-based card sort tool, it's easy for people with social and communication challenges to use. Physically holding and sorting the cards is much easier than listing and prioritising the goals verbally or in writing. To access the Adolescent and Adult Goal Setting tool, you need to log on to the Autism Queensland website, and Sally will post that link in the chat panel right now for you, and we'll also have that in the resources that we send out. So I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much, Peta and Marina, for sharing your time and insights with us. If you'd like to visit Inclusion Ed or myWAY Employability or download the StepRight app, we'll pop links in the chat and also send information out post this webinar. I hope you found the webinar informative and insightful, and I'd like to thank all our listeners for joining us today. We'd appreciate if you could fill in the survey that's just been shared in the chat. This year's webinar series has been extremely popular with almost 2,000 registrations across 6 sessions. If you'd like to share today's webinar, we'll be placing a recording of the session on our YouTube channel, and we'll share this recording on the website through our regular social media channels, Facebook and Twitter, and most likely in a couple of weeks' time. If you'd like to know more about the Autism CRC, we really encourage you to visit our website where you can sign up for the e-news and participate in any of our research projects. You can also follow us on social media. Once again, thank you, Marina, thank you, Peta, and thank you, Jill. And thank you also to the Autism CRC team behind the scenes who've made this webinar possible. And thank you for joining us.